So today we digging into a big, messy question. Do you tell your kids about the affair? We're going there. It does not matter if you stayed together or if you split. It doesn't matter if your kids are still at home and underage or if they are grown and living on their own. That question will still find its way to the table. And I'm going to be honest and upfront with you. There is no easy answer. This is not a yes or no kind of deal, but it is worth talking about because it sits at the intersection of sex and intimacy, betrayal, relationships, and family, all the things. So, of course, that's why we're talking about it here on Sex in Real Life. So, the dilemma. On one side, there is this instinct to protect. Why would I drag my kids into this? Do they need to know? Or will it just make things worse? And on the other side, there is the instinct toward honesty. I don't want to lie to them. I don't want them to grow up with a false story about our family. And what if they found out later and feel betrayed that we didn't tell them? Both instincts make sense. I mean, protection and truth, safety and honesty. It all makes sense. And the answer shifts depending on where your kids are in life, honestly. If they are young and still at home, maybe what they need most is stability. Maybe they don't need to know the details, but they do need to know that something's happening because kids always know when something's off. They are not dumb. They sense tension. They feel silence. And so pretending nothing is happening does not fool them, even if you never say it. And if they're grown, the question is a little bit more complicated because now it's not just about protecting them. It becomes about whether you want that level of intimacy with them as adults. Again, because intimacy is not just for couples, it's also in families, and intimacy is about being known and it's about being seen in your wholeness. Then here's another added piece to the puzzle and something that you really need to think about. The difference between privacy and secrecy, because they're not the same. Privacy is when you keep something to yourself that does not hurt anybody else. It's yours to hold. Secrecy is when you hide something that directly affects other people, and that's totally different. And if an affair has shifted the ground your family is standing on, then it might not just be private, it might also be secrecy. We are not going to unpack all that right now because it deserves its own conversation and it will get one. So I am going to dedicate a whole episode to privacy versus secrecy in the future because it is something that comes up all the time and it can do real damage when we don't know the difference or we blur the line. But I just wanted to drop that in to give you something to hold in the frame as you think about this. Another layer. Of course, there's another layer, Stacey, because this is complicated. So yeah, it's layered. So another layer to think about, though, is, and this is especially true for adult children, are the people your children know representatives of you, or are they the real you? Like, have you been showing up as your representative or as yourself in your relationship with your children? And this is not a judgment because I'm a parent and I get it. And most of us put on a parent mask, the caretaker mask, the provider mask. And our children grow up knowing the version of us that showed up the most, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean they get to see the full human behind them. In fact, most of our kids, and this is true for myself as an adult and also for my daughter, a lot of times we don't even get to see our parents in 3 or 4 dimensions until we're grown. Like, it's not like, 18. Sometimes we are 30 or 35 before we realize it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, my parents have whole emotional worlds inside of them. That's crazy. So this is really important to consider, and maybe it's fine for your children to see you wearing the parent mask. Maybe that's fine for you. And maybe that's all you want to give them. But if you want intimacy with your kids as adults, if you want them to really know you, then you need to be more than your representative. I am not at all recommending that you play a representative in your children's life. And again, there's so many layers because you can give even underage minor children, even toddlers even, you can show them a lot of you, it doesn't mean that you got to tell them all your business. Showing up authentically is also being aware of where your kid is at, right? Every version of your child at every stage, they deserve the whole you. And when it comes to affairs, though, whether you stayed or left might be part of that story. But let me emphasize this very, very strongly. If you decide to tell your kids about an affair, it does not mean that you should dump the gritty details on them. They do not need a play-by-play. They do not need to become your therapist or your referee. If you decide to do that, you need to find the version of the truth that your family can hold, the version that honors their right to know without putting them in the middle. That can be delicate. So you might need a therapist involved, like you might need a third party involved, because that can be a slippery slope, and you want to make sure that you do it with grace and care, but also giving it the level of space it deserves. If the relationship survived the affair, and if it's healthy enough to sit with this, then ideally, you shouldn't be making this decision on your own anyway. If you can, make it together, talk it through, decide as a team what your kids need to know and how to tell it. And again, invite in a third party if necessary, which is highly recommended, honestly. Because the story doesn't just belong to one of you. It doesn't just belong to the person who was betrayed. It also doesn't just belong to the person who stepped out. It belongs to the family, and the way you tell it will shape how your kids understand not just you, but themselves and the family unit. So here's the last piece. I want to talk about your kids' capacity, because intimacy is a two-way street. Well, depending on how many family members, two-way between you and the other person. It might be a three-way street, you and the other person and you and the other people, because there is the relationship you have with the other person. There's the relationship you have with yourself, but there's also the relationship. The relationship is a separate entity. So it's the relationship you have individually with your children, and then there's the family unit relationship. So I know that's a lot, but so intimacy needs to work in all those directions. So it's not just about whether you want to be known. It's also about whether they're able or willing to know you in deeper ways. And some adult children have the emotional intelligence and the emotional maturity to hold, a truth like infidelity. They have enough, emotional bandwidth to be able to see you as a whole person beyond, mom or dad or parent. And some kids don't, even when they're grown. Like sometimes, your kids could be in their 50s. That does not mean that they have the emotional intelligence, the maturity, or the capacity to hold all of that. They might not. They might have boundaries around that level of intimate sharing, and sometimes they just don't want to know you like that. Like some children, even adult children, need to see you in a box. I'm not judging what that means or whether it's healthy or not. It doesn't matter. If that's where they are, then you got to meet them where they're at. So if that's where they are, that's okay. You need to respect the line. So before you decide to disclose, you need to ask, like, what can they actually hold? Do they want this level of intimacy, or am I crossing a line that they don't want crossed? So do you tell your kids about the affair? I told you the answer wasn't easy. It's not. But here's what I hope you take away from this. It's not just about the event. It's about the intimacy. It's about whether you want your kids to know the representative of you or the whole you. It's about whether you're holding something in privacy or secrecy. It's about whether you're making the choice alone or together. It's about whether your kids can actually hold what you want to share. And it's also whether or not it needs to be shared. A lot of nuance, but that's reality. This is Sex in Real Life. because bodies have feelings. And I will see you again, same time, same channel, next week.